A piece of pottery can hold secrets for thousands of years. This video explores traditional pottery techniques that have survived millennia, defying time itself. You will learn exactly how these ancient methods were passed down through countless generations and why they endured when so many other arts were lost forever. We will uncover the stories behind sacred clays and mysterious kilns, revealing how this historical craftsmanship is more relevant today than ever before. How does an art form remain unchanged for centuries, carrying the fingerprints of our ancestors directly into our hands? This partnership between human hands and the earth itself started with a simple choice. For over 25,000 years, potters have understood that not all clay is created equal. The very ground beneath their feet held the key to their craft, a secret language of soil and sediment. In ancient China, the discovery of a special white clay, rich in a mineral called kaolin, unlocked the possibility of porcelain. This fine, pure material could withstand the intense heat of a dragon kiln, transforming into a substance as strong as stone yet miraculously translucent. Half a world away, the potters of Mesopotamia worked with a completely different earth. Their clay was coarse and gritty, filled with tiny particles of sand and crushed rock. This might sound like a flaw, but it was a feature. It made their pots and storage jars incredibly strong and resistant to thermal shock, perfect for storing grain and oil in the harsh sun. A master potter did not just see dirt. They developed a profound, almost spiritual connection to their material. They could judge the quality of a clay deposit by rolling a small amount between their fingers, feeling its plasticity. They learned to read its color, from the deep red of iron-rich earth to the pale gray of kaolin. Some traditions even held that a potter could taste the clay, a final test to understand its composition and potential. This intimate, generational knowledge of raw materials was the unshakable foundation of everything that followed, a precious secret guarded and passed down like a sacred trust. This profound connection to the earth was then shaped by the most fundamental of human tools, the hands themselves. Before the invention of the wheel, potters across the globe relied on two simple yet powerful techniques, the coil method and the pinch method. Picture a craftsperson sitting on the ground, rolling a lump of clay into a long, snake-like rope. This is the beginning of the coil method. They take this coil and spiral it into a flat base, then carefully stack coil upon coil, building the walls of a pot layer by layer. The rhythm is slow and meditative, a deliberate stacking that allows for incredible control. With just their fingers, a bit of water, and a smooth stone for polishing, they could coax a massive storage jar or an intricately shaped ceremonial vessel from the earth. This technique was so universal, so accessible, that we find nearly identical coil-built pottery in ancient villages from the American Southwest to the river valleys of China, all dating back thousands of years to the Neolithic era. For smaller, more personal items, the pinch method was often preferred. This is perhaps the most intuitive way to shape clay. A potter would start with a single, solid ball of clay, push their thumb deep into its center, and then slowly, carefully, pinch and rotate the walls between their thumb and fingers, expanding the hollow until a small bowl or cup emerged. This direct contact, this intimate conversation between hand and material, created a tangible link. Every subtle pressure, every fingerprint was recorded in the final object. It was a process that lacked the speed of a potter's wheel, but it gained something priceless in return, a profound sense of connection between the maker's intention and the very essence of the clay. Yet this intimate, hand-built connection was about to be transformed by a spinning disc. Around 3,500 years before the Common Era, in the heart of Mesopotamia, a revolutionary technology emerged that would change pottery forever: the potter's wheel. This was not a motorized device but a simple, heavy stone disc mounted on an axle. The potter would set it spinning with one hand or a stick, and then, with clay placed on its center, use both hands to shape the vessel as it turned. This invention was a leap in human ingenuity, akin to the later development of the printing press for the written word. It shifted the craft from a slow, additive process to a dynamic, centrifugal one. Speed and symmetry became possible on a scale never before imagined. Potters could now produce thinner, more refined wares with a consistency that was simply unattainable by hand. But the true masterpiece of this technology was the kick wheel, a design so perfect it endured for millennia. The potter powered this wheel with their own foot, pushing a heavy flywheel into a steady, rhythmic rotation. This freed both hands to work the clay, but it demanded an incredible physical harmony, a constant balancing of forceful kicks with the delicate touch of the fingers. The first and most critical lesson for any apprentice was learning to center the clay. This was a meditative, almost spiritual act. A lump of clay thrown onto the spinning wheel head is a chaotic, wobbling mass. The potter must apply steady, equal pressure with wet hands, coaxing the clay upward and then downward until it spins in perfect alignment with the wheel's axis without a single shudder. Only from this state of perfect centeredness can a form be raised. A potter's skill was measured by their ability to achieve this stillness within motion. This profound technology did not stay in one place. It traveled along ancient trade routes from the Middle East to Egypt to Greece and across the world. Yet, wherever it went, its core principle remained unchanged. The perfect marriage of rotational force and human control proved so effective that for thousands of years, there was simply no need to improve upon it. The wheel itself became a timeless tool, its whirring sound a constant whisper of an ancient revolution. But that perfectly centered clay, spinning in quiet harmony, was only half the story. The true magic, the alchemical transformation from soft earth to enduring stone, happened in the fire. Long before the elegant dragon kilns of China, the very first potters faced a fundamental challenge: how to make their fragile creations permanent. Their solution was as primal as humanity itself. They used fire. The earliest firing technique was breathtakingly simple: a bonfire. Potters would carefully arrange their dried clay pots within a pile of wood, brush, or even dried animal dung. They would then light the pile and let it burn, a process that could last for many hours. This open firing was a dramatic and unpredictable event. The temperatures were relatively low and the heat was uneven, with pots on the outside of the fire receiving less heat than those at the core. The results were often a lottery. Some pots would emerge strong, while others would crack or even explode from thermal stress. But this rudimentary process created a distinct type of pottery known as earthenware. It was porous, meaning it could not hold water without being sealed, but it was also incredibly resilient in its own way. The fire did more than just harden the clay, it marked it. Pots would be streaked with patterns of black and orange from the smoke and flames, each piece carrying the unique signature of its fiery birth. This was not a flaw, it was a record of the event itself, a quality that modern potters still strive to replicate for its raw, elemental beauty. To gain a little more control, ancient potters developed the pit kiln. Instead of building a fire on the ground, they would dig a pit, place the pottery inside, and then build the fire on top of it. The earth itself acted as an insulator, trapping the heat more effectively and allowing for a slightly longer, more consistent firing. While still far from precise, this method represented a monumental leap in human understanding. It was one of our first deliberate manipulations of pyrotechnology, the science of controlling fire for a specific purpose. The survival of these basic firing methods in some cultures to this day is a testament to their profound effectiveness. They require no complex technology, only a deep, intuitive knowledge of materials and flame. This knowledge, learned through generations of trial and error, was not just about making pots. It was a foundational skill that paved the way for metallurgy, glassmaking, and the very development of civilization. Each successfully fired pot was a small victory in humanity's long conversation with the elements. The unpredictable dance of the bonfire was a force to be respected, but eventually potters sought to tame it. The great leap forward came with the invention of the enclosed kiln, a structure that fundamentally changed humanity's relationship with fire. This was no longer an open event, but a controlled environment. The kiln separated the fire itself, contained within a firebox, from the chamber where the pottery was carefully stacked. This simple division was everything. It allowed heat and hot gases to circulate around the wares without the pots being directly exposed to the flames and flying ash. For the first time, potters could achieve temperatures that were not only higher but far more consistent, unlocking possibilities that were simply unimaginable with a pit fire. Some of the most breathtaking examples of this engineering emerged in China. There, potters built dragon kilns, massive structures that crawled up the sides of hills. These kilns were named for their long, serpentine shape, sometimes stretching for over 100 feet. The genius of the design was its use of natural draft. By building on an incline, the heat from the firebox at the bottom would naturally rise, pulling oxygen through the entire length of the chamber and creating a powerful, self-sustaining airflow. This intense, even heat was the essential ingredient for the legendary Celadon glazes of the Song dynasty. These glazes, derived from iron oxide in the clay and ash, required a very specific, reducing atmosphere inside the kiln, a precise balance of fuel and air that could only be achieved in such a sophisticated enclosure. The result was a glassy surface with a subtle, mystical color ranging from pale green to gray-blue, often compared to jade or a quiet sky after rain. Across the sea in Japan, a different kiln architecture gave birth to another celebrated tradition. The Noburigama, or climbing kiln, was a multi-chamber design built on a slope. Each chamber was connected to the next with the firebox at the lowest point. As the firing progressed, the potter would sequentially stoke each chamber, effectively moving the zone of highest temperature up the hill. This staged firing allowed for incredible control and the efficient production of large quantities of pottery. It was in the Noburigama that the iconic Bizen ware was born. Bizen pots are famous for what they lack. They are typically unglazed. Their beautiful, earthy surfaces, marked by flashes of reddish-brown or subtle green, are created entirely by the effects of the fire. As wood ash landed on the pots during the long firing, it would melt at high temperature, forming a natural, unpredictable glaze. The placement of each piece within the kiln was a critical decision, determining how the flames would kiss the clay and leave their permanent mark. The knowledge required to build and operate these kilns was not written in manuals. It was a living science passed down through generations within guilds and family workshops. The exact composition of the bricks, the subtle angles for optimal airflow, and the intricate timing of the firing cycles were considered priceless secrets. A master potter could read the color of the flames peeking through a spy hole and know precisely when to add more wood or close a damper. This was a deep, intuitive understanding of thermal dynamics earned through decades of experience. The sheer endurance of these kiln architectures, some still in use today, tells us a profound truth. Once a culture discovered an optimal thermal environment for its specific clay and aesthetic goals, that knowledge became a permanent part of its identity. It was a technological peak so perfectly adapted to its purpose that it simply did not need to be replaced. The true mastery of the kiln, however, went far beyond simply containing the fire. It involved learning to breathe with it. The most revered potters developed techniques to manipulate the very atmosphere inside the kiln, a process known as reduction firing. This was not a matter of building a hotter fire, but a different kind of fire altogether. At a precise moment when the kiln reaches a critical temperature, the potter deliberately restricts the air supply. This creates an oxygen-starved environment, a condition where the hungry flames are forced to seek oxygen from another source. They begin to pull it from the metallic oxides embedded within the clay body and the glaze itself. This chemical robbery transforms the materials on a fundamental level. Iron oxide, which in a normal, oxygen-rich firing would produce earthy tones of red or brown, is chemically reduced. It surrenders an oxygen atom, shifting its state and revealing a stunning palette of deep greens, subtle grays, and that most legendary of colors, the oxblood red of Chinese porcelain. This was not a color that could be painted on. It was a color born from the fire's breath, a secret hidden within the clay that only a master could coax into being. The same alchemical principle created the metallic lusters that adorned Islamic pottery. By reducing silver or copper compounds in the glaze, potters achieved surfaces that shimmered with an almost magical, reflective quality like captured moonlight. Achieving a perfect reduction was a high-stakes gamble. It required an intuitive feel for the fire's behavior, a skill learned through decades of watching flame color and smoke density. Opening the air vent too soon would ruin the effect, leaving the colors dull. Leaving it closed for too long could cause the glaze to turn smoky and black, or worse, make the pots brittle. The potter was not just a technician, but an alchemist, actively manipulating an invisible chemical reaction to achieve magical results. This delicate dance with the elements, this conversation with the fire, is one of the most profound secrets that has been preserved across the centuries. This mastery over fire was matched only by the artistry applied before the pot ever entered the kiln. The desire to tell a story on the surface of clay is as ancient as pottery itself. Long before the complex chemistry of glazes was understood, potters discovered a beautifully simple way to decorate their work, using the earth itself as their pigment. They created slips, a mixture of finely ground clay and water, but using a clay of a different color than the main vessel. This liquid clay could be brushed, dabbed, or even blown onto the leather-hard surface of a pot, creating a stark and durable contrast. The leather-hard stage was crucial, a moment when the clay had dried just enough to not lose its shape, but was still soft enough to accept the slip without cracking. With this simple medium, artists unlocked a world of expression. Using brushes made from animal hair, chewed twigs, or even feathers, they painted intricate geometric patterns, stylized animals, and powerful symbolic motifs that spoke of their beliefs and their world. It was a direct form of communication, a clay canvas that captured the imagination of a culture. No civilization demonstrated the narrative power of slip more brilliantly than the ancient Greeks. They perfected a technique that was nothing short of alchemical. They would paint figures onto a pot using a slip that was rich in iron. Then, through an incredibly controlled 3-stage firing process in their kiln, they performed a kind of magic. The areas painted with the iron-rich slip would turn a glossy, permanent black. The unpainted areas, the background, would remain the red color of the clay. This was the black figure technique, where dark figures seemed to emerge from a red ground, telling epic stories of gods and heroes. Later, they reversed the process in the red figure technique. They painted the background black, leaving the figures reserved in the red clay. This allowed for far more detail to be incised into the figures, creating scenes of astonishing fluidity and life. These were not mere decorations, they were frozen mythology, narratives that have survived for thousands of years with a clarity that still feels immediate. The enduring appeal of slip lies in its beautiful simplicity. It required no rare minerals or complex recipes, just a keen eye for different colored soils and the skill of a storyteller's hand. It connects us directly to that fundamental human impulse to leave a mark, to adorn an object with meaning, and to ensure that a story, once told, would not be easily erased by time. The stories painted with slip were beautiful, but they lacked a final, magical seal. That seal arrived with the discovery of glaze, a glassy coating that transformed porous clay into a waterproof vessel and added a dimension of pure, dazzling color. This was a revolution born from a beautiful accident. Inside those early wood-fired kilns, ash from the burning fuel would drift through the superheated air and settle on the shoulders of the pots. At just the right temperature, this ash, rich in silica, would melt. It fused with the clay surface, cooling into a thin, often greenish glass. The first potter to pull a pot from the kiln and find it unexpectedly sealed with this natural glass must have felt they had witnessed a miracle. What was once a chance occurrence became a target. Potters began to intentionally replicate the effect, creating the first true glazes by mixing ash with water and brushing it onto their wares before firing. This was humanity learning to make a kind of rock, glass, and bond it permanently to another kind of rock, clay. It was a foundational moment in material science. The quest for more control over this process led to centuries of relentless experimentation. Potters became alchemists, testing countless materials from their environment. They discovered that adding lead to a glaze mixture made it melt at a much lower temperature, creating a brilliantly shiny, durable surface. This discovery spread across the ancient world, from China to the Roman Empire, revolutionizing tableware. Later, in the Middle East, artisans found that adding tin oxide to a lead-based glaze created an opaque, milk-white canvas. This invention was the key that unlocked some of the world's most celebrated ceramic traditions. In Renaissance Italy, this white glaze became the foundation for majolica. Artists painted elaborate scenes in vibrant colors onto the dry, powdery white surface. During the firing, the glaze would melt and the colors would sink into it, emerging with a brilliant, luminous depth. The technique traveled north to the Netherlands, where it evolved into the iconic blue and white Delftware, a style so popular it was created to mimic the prized porcelain arriving from the East. The recipes for these glazes were not simple formulas. They were complex chemical codes, often containing 10 or more ingredients, each measured by feel and experience. This knowledge was power, and it was guarded with intense secrecy. Master potters would record their recipes in personal notebooks using cryptic symbols or pass them down orally only to their most trusted apprentices on their deathbeds. Each generation would then refine the recipe, perhaps adjusting the ratio of sand to ash or adding a secret ingredient like ground seashells to achieve a specific texture or color response in the kiln. The survival of these formulas across centuries is a story of both careful preservation and fearless innovation. It represents a deep, cumulative understanding of chemistry, long before the science had a formal name, all dedicated to capturing light and color in a permanent, crystalline skin. This pursuit of a perfect glaze was not always about control. Sometimes, the greatest beauty emerged from a deliberate surrender to the elements. In the tradition of wood firing, the potter orchestrates the conditions but ultimately allows the fire itself to become the final artist. The process begins with the careful stacking of the kiln, an act known as packing. Each pot is placed with intention, some shielded from the direct path of the flames, others positioned to receive their full, passionate kiss. The type of wood selected is crucial. Pine, rich in resins, will produce a different ash than a clean burning oak. As the kiln fires for days, even weeks, the potter stokes the firebox in a relentless rhythm. With each new log, a storm of fine ash is carried on the superheated currents swirling inside the kiln. This ash travels like snow on the wind, settling on the shoulders of the pots, catching in the subtle textures of the clay. When the temperature climbs high enough, often exceeding 2000 degrees Fahrenheit, a magical transformation occurs. The ash, which is essentially a natural form of glass, begins to melt. It fuses with the clay body, creating a glaze that is entirely unique to that single firing. The results are gloriously unpredictable. A pot might be adorned with rivulets of green from melted pine ash, or speckled with orange and brown where iron in the clay has reacted with the flame. The side of a vase facing the fire might be coated in a thick, dripping glaze, while the back retains the raw, earthy quality of the clay. This is not a flaw, it is a record of the pot's journey through the inferno. In Japan, this philosophy is deeply ingrained in traditions like Bizen and Shigaraki. Bizen potters, for instance, use no applied glaze at all. They rely solely on the effects of the fire and the natural ash to create their celebrated surfaces. A Shigaraki jar might emerge from the kiln with a warm, peach-colored skin and patches of glassy green where embers rested against it for a moment, an effect poetically known as goma or sesame seeds. The potter does not fight this randomness, they celebrate it. Each piece is a one-of-a-kind collaboration between human intention and the wild, untamable spirit of the fire. This acceptance of chance reflects a profound cultural value, an embrace of imperfection known as Wabi-Sabi, which finds beauty in the transient and the asymmetrical. The survival of this demanding, time-consuming technique in our age of industrial precision is a powerful statement. It reminds us that some mysteries are not meant to be solved, only witnessed and cherished. That deliberate surrender to the fire's whims creates objects of profound beauty, yet it stands in stark contrast to one of the most practical and enduring ceramic traditions. Terracotta and earthenware represent the very backbone of pottery's history, defined by a fundamental principle: firing clay at a relatively low temperature. This thermal sweet spot between 1000 and 1150 degrees Celsius is where clay undergoes its most basic transformation. It becomes hard and durable, yet it remains porous. This porosity is not a weakness but the source of its timeless utility. From the sun-baked villages of the Mediterranean to the bustling markets of Mexico, this simple technique has flourished for thousands of years precisely because it demands so little. It requires less fuel and far less sophisticated kilns than the intense heats needed for stoneware or porcelain. This accessibility made it a truly global art form, a technology that could spring up anywhere people had clay and a source of fire. The ancient Greeks used it to create the exquisite Tanagra figurines, delicate statuettes with finely detailed drapery that have survived for over 2 millennia. Yet the same basic process half a world away gives us the vibrant Talavera pottery of Mexico with its bold, colorful patterns on a white tin glaze. The resilience of this tradition lies in its perfect marriage of function and form. That porous quality, for instance, is a brilliant natural cooling system. In hot climates across Africa, the Middle East and Asia, an unglazed earthenware water jar, known as a botillo in Spain or a gara in South Asia, performs a simple miracle. As water slowly seeps through the microscopic pores and evaporates on the outside surface, it draws heat from the liquid within, cooling it significantly. For countless generations, this was the most effective refrigeration available, a life-sustaining technology born from the most humble of materials. This is the enduring power of terracotta, a testament to how the simplest solutions, born from an intimate understanding of material and need, can outlast empires. The quiet utility of terracotta was a triumph of simplicity, but a new frontier awaited in the heart of the fire. By pushing the kiln's temperature hundreds of degrees hotter, potters discovered they could fundamentally alter the clay itself. This is the Stoneware Revolution, a leap that transformed soft earth into a material as dense and durable as stone. At temperatures soaring between 1,200 and 1,300 degrees Celsius, something magical happens to the clay particles. They begin to fuse together in a process called vitrification. The microscopic gaps that made earthenware porous simply melt away, sealing the clay body into a single, solid mass. The result is a pot that is naturally waterproof and incredibly strong, even without a single drop of glaze. This was not an incremental improvement. It was a complete redefinition of what pottery could be. The emergence of stoneware is a fascinating story of parallel invention. In China during the Shang dynasty, master potters achieved these searing temperatures in their advanced kilns, creating robust vessels that could withstand the demands of an expanding empire. Centuries later, and entirely independently, potters in the Rhineland region of Germany made the same discovery. They developed kilns fueled by abundant coal, which burned hotter and longer than wood, allowing them to produce their own distinct style of stoneware, often with a characteristic salt glaze. This independent convergence tells us something vital. When a culture's needs grew beyond basic storage to include heavy-duty cooking pots, industrial storage jars, and even drainage pipes for growing cities, the incentive to develop a tougher material became irresistible. Stoneware was the answer. It was the industrial ceramic of its age, built for hard labor and long-distance trade. A stoneware jar could be shipped across oceans, used for fermenting foods for years, or buried in the ground as a drain pipe, all without degrading. Its survival was not just about preserving a technique. It was about preserving a principle, the human desire to create objects that endure, to build things meant to outlive their makers. Yet this quest for strength through fire was about to be eclipsed by a far more elusive prize, a ceramic so perfect it seemed to defy the very nature of clay. For over 1,000 years, the secret of porcelain was one of the most fiercely guarded treasures of the ancient world. Its creation was an alchemical dream, a material that appeared to capture moonlight within its walls. True porcelain possessed a triad of magical qualities. It was brilliantly white, even in its raw, unglazed state. It was resonant, producing a clear, bell-like ring when tapped. And most astonishingly, it was translucent, allowing light to pass through its thin walls as if it were a kind of solid milk. This was not merely refined pottery. This was a new state of matter, and its secret belonged entirely to China. The formula was deceptively simple in theory, but nearly impossible to execute. It required two specific ingredients fused together at a temperature that pushed the very limits of ancient kiln technology. The first was a fine white clay known as kaolin, named after the Jialing mountain in China where it was first quarried. Kaolin is incredibly pure, with a high content of a mineral called kaolinite, which gives it its refractory quality, meaning it can withstand immense heat without deforming. The second ingredient was petunci, or China stone, a feldspathic rock that acted as a flux. When these two were mixed in the correct proportions and subjected to a searing heat exceeding 1,300 degrees Celsius, they underwent a complete metamorphosis. The petunci would melt into a glassy matrix, binding the stubborn kaolin particles into a single, vitrified, and translucent body. For centuries, European royalty and merchants were captivated by this mysterious substance. They called it white gold, and they desperately tried to unravel its mystery. Alchemists and glassmakers, sponsored by kings, conducted endless experiments, attempting to replicate it with ingredients like ground glass and animal bones. They produced fine earthenwares and soft paste porcelains that mimicked the whiteness, but they always lacked the essential strength and that magical translucency. The Chinese monopoly was not just a matter of recipe, it was a mastery of the entire process, from mining the sacred clay to building kilns that could sustain a dragon's breath for days on end. The secret did not travel the Silk Road. It remained locked within the workshops of Jingdezhen, a city that became the porcelain capital of the world. The breakthrough finally came not in a royal court but in a dungeon. In the early 18th century, Augustus the Strong, Elector of Saxony, was so obsessed with porcelain that he imprisoned a young alchemist named Johann Friedrich Bircher, demanding he produce gold. Bircher failed at alchemy, but with the help of scientist Ehrenfried Walther von T. Skirnhaus, turned his attention to clay. After years of tireless experimentation, they discovered a deposit of kaolin near the town of Meissen. In 1708, they successfully fired the first true European hard-paste porcelain. The Meissen factory was born, and the ancient Chinese secret was out. But this was not the end of the tradition, it was a new beginning. The knowledge spread rapidly across Europe, but it did not create mere copies. Each region adapted the formula to its local clays and its own aesthetic sensibilities. The French at Sevres developed a uniquely soft, creamy porcelain. The English perfected bone china, adding ash from animal bones to achieve a warm, translucent quality. The endurance of porcelain making lies in this beautiful paradox. It is a material of extreme delicacy, seemingly as fragile as an eggshell, yet it possesses a molecular strength that allows a thin cup to withstand boiling water for a century. It is this combination of ethereal beauty and profound resilience that continues to captivate us, a testament to a human obsession that finally, triumphantly, captured light itself in clay. The surface of a pot can become a canvas for intricate stories, not just with paint, but through the careful removal of material itself. Sgraffito is a technique of exquisite precision, a form of drawing where the artist uses a sharp tool not to add ink, but to reveal a hidden image. The process begins with a leather-hard pot covered in a thin layer of contrasting colored slip. This surface is the artist's dark paper. With a stylus, often just a sharpened stick or a needle, they scratch through this top layer, carving away lines to expose the lighter-colored clay body beneath. The effect is immediate and dramatic, like a drawing emerging from the shadows. This method allowed medieval European potters to create elaborate heraldic designs and Persian artisans to cover vessels with flowing Arabic calligraphy and intricate floral patterns, all with a clarity and sharpness that brush painting could rarely achieve. The skill required is immense. There is no undo button in clay. Every cut is permanent, demanding a steady hand and a mind that can visualize the final positive image by planning the negative spaces it will create. A related but subtly different art is mishima. Here, the process is reversed. Instead of carving away to reveal, the artist first incises delicate lines directly into the leather-hard clay. Then they fill these carved channels with a colored slip, often black or red, using a brush or simply rubbing the liquid clay into the grooves. Once the slip has set slightly, the potter takes a metal rib and scrapes the entire surface clean. The slip remains only within the incised lines, leaving a design that is perfectly inlaid, flush with the surface of the pot. This technique, which has roots in Korea before spreading to Japan, creates a remarkably smooth, refined finish. The line work is crisp and precise, almost like an engraving. The survival of both Sgraffito and mishima speaks to a deep human desire for detail and permanence in decoration. In a world before digital printing or mechanical reproduction, these were among the highest forms of graphic art available to the potter. They represent a commitment to slowness, to a kind of meditative focus where the hand, the eye, and the tool must work in perfect harmony. Each piece is a unique record of that concentration, a testament to the belief that some forms of beauty are worth the immense patience they demand. That quest for precision and permanence finds a powerful counterpoint in a tradition that celebrates the beauty of a single, fleeting moment. Raku pottery was born in 16th century Japan, not for royal courts or export markets, but for the quiet, intimate ritual of the tea ceremony. In this context, the vessel was not meant to be a perfect, distant object of admiration. It was a humble, tactile companion to a meditative practice, and its creation mirrored that philosophy. The Raku process is a dramatic, almost theatrical event. After a brief firing in a small, efficient kiln, the potter opens the door to reveal a pot glowing with a fierce orange heat. With long metal tongs, they carefully lift the shimmering vessel and swiftly place it into a waiting container filled with combustible materials like sawdust, straw, or leaves. The moment the hot clay touches this fuel, the materials burst into flames. The potter then often seals the container, creating an oxygen-poor environment that triggers a rapid post-firing reduction. This sudden thermal shock and chemical change produce effects that are entirely unique to that instant. The glazes can crackle into a delicate web of fine lines. Metallic lusters flash across the surface, and the smoke from the burning material is trapped against the clay, leaving deep, carbon-black stains that no brush could ever replicate. Unlike the potter who spends days controlling a wood kiln's atmosphere, the Raku artist embraces chance as a co-creator. There is no way to perfectly predict the final result. A pot intended to be a brilliant copper red might emerge with a smoky gray veil, while a simple white glaze might be transformed by an unexpected kiss of orange flame. This is the heart of Wabi-Sabi, the profound Japanese aesthetic that finds beauty in the imperfect, the irregular, and the transient. A Raku bowl, with its asymmetrical form and unpredictable surface, is not a failed attempt at perfection. It is a perfect record of its own creation, a captured breath of fire and smoke. This philosophical foundation is why Raku has endured and spread across the globe. It offers a powerful antidote to the modern pursuit of flawless, mass-produced objects. In a world of precision, Raku is a reminder that some of the most profound beauty is born from collaboration with the unpredictable elements, a meditation on the elegance of letting go. A glossy, watertight surface did not always require the alchemy of a kiln. Long before the invention of glaze, potters discovered they could achieve a deep, lustrous shine with nothing more than patience and a smooth stone. This is the ancient art of burnishing, a technique of pure physical persuasion. When a pot reaches the leather-hard stage, its surface is firm yet still receptive. A craftsperson would take a highly polished tool, perhaps a river pebble, a piece of bone, or even a hard seed pod, and rub the clay surface in a steady, relentless motion. This action is not merely smoothing, it is a process of compaction. The tool presses the tiny, loose clay particles flat, aligning them into a dense, seamless skin. The friction generates heat, further helping to seal the surface. The result, after hours of meticulous work, is a finish that can rival the reflective quality of glass, a natural glaze created by pressure alone. What is truly remarkable is how this knowledge emerged independently in cultures separated by vast oceans. In the pre-Columbian Americas, artisans created stunning blackware pottery with a mirror-like sheen. Across Africa, tribes used burnishing to create robust, waterproof vessels for storing water and grain, their surfaces often decorated with intricate patterns etched into the shine. This was not a technology that needed to be traded along the Silk Road. It was a universal discovery, a testament to a shared human impulse to transform a rough, earthen object into something refined and beautiful. The resilience of burnishing lies in its profound simplicity. It demands no specific clay chemistry, no special fuels, and no complex kiln designs. It requires only a determined hand and the understanding that within the very nature of clay lies a hidden luminosity, waiting to be revealed by relentless, careful friction. That deep, luminous blue on a porcelain vase is more than a color. It is a captured piece of the sky, and its story is a map of the ancient world. For over 1,000 years, the quest for this specific shade of blue drove exploration, fueled economies, and connected empires. The secret was a mineral, cobalt oxide, which when painted onto white clay and covered with a clear glaze, would transform in the kiln's heat into a brilliant, permanent azure. But the finest cobalt ore was not found everywhere. Its primary source for centuries was in the remote mountains of Persia, modern-day Iran. Persian artisans had mastered its use, creating stunning tiles and vessels adorned with intricate blue patterns. This made raw cobalt, often called in trade records by names like Mohammedan blue, one of the most valuable commodities moving along the Silk Road. It was lighter and far more valuable than silk, a concentrated treasure. Chinese merchants and potters, always seeking new artistic horizons, eagerly traded for this mysterious blue powder. When it arrived in the ceramic heartland of Jingdezhen, it met its perfect partner, the pure white clay of Chinese porcelain. The marriage was explosive. Under the Yuan and Ming dynasties, Chinese artisans began producing the now legendary blue and white porcelain. They adapted the Persian pigment to their own aesthetic, painting not abstract patterns but vast, narrative scenes of dragons chasing pearls, lotus flowers blooming in ponds, and mountainous landscapes shrouded in mist. This was not a simple copy, it was a brilliant reinvention. The Chinese potters perfected the technique of underglaze decoration. They would paint the intricate designs directly onto the bone-dry, unfired clay using a brush loaded with a cobalt pigment mixed with water. This was a moment of incredible risk and skill. The painted design was fragile, a mere dusting on the surface, and it would be completely covered by a thick, milky layer of liquid glaze. The artist had to trust that after being dipped, the hidden image would survive intact and fire true. Inside the dragon kiln, the magic happened. The clear glaze melted into a glassy, protective coating, and the cobalt blue bloomed beneath it, locked in perfect clarity for eternity. These porcelains became so coveted that they were more valuable than gold in Europe, where they were known simply as white gold. The demand was so great that it sparked one of history's greatest technological detective stories. European potters, unable to crack the secret of true porcelain, found a way to mimic the beloved blue and white style. In the Dutch city of Delft, they developed a tin-glazed earthenware, painting cobalt blue designs on a white opaque glaze. Delftware became a sensation, a more accessible version of the exotic Chinese import. Later, when the Mason factory in Germany finally discovered how to make true hard paste porcelain, the first thing they did was decorate it with cobalt blue patterns, completing a circular journey of a technique that had traveled from the Middle East to China and back to Europe. The profound survival of this process lies in its beautiful constancy. Whether in a Persian workshop, a Jingdezhen kiln, or a Delft studio, the essential steps remained the same: a pigment applied before the glaze, a trust in the fire's transformative power. It is a technique that survived not by staying pure, but by being endlessly reinterpreted, a blue thread woven through the tapestry of human creativity. But sometimes a potter's vision demanded something far more monumental than a vessel. For the creation of large, intricate sculptures, neither the wheel nor the coil method was enough. This challenge led to the development of one of the most ingenious and dramatic processes in all of ceramic history, the lost wax technique. Though famously used for casting bronze, this method was also a secret weapon for creating breathtaking ceramic masterworks. The process begins not with clay but with wax. An artist would first sculpt their entire design, every fine detail, in beeswax or a similar pliable material. This wax original was a masterpiece in itself, a positive image of the final piece. Once the wax sculpture was complete, the potter would embark on a delicate and risky procedure. They would carefully encase the entire wax model in a thick layer of clay, creating a mold. This was not a simple covering, it was an engineered shell, often with multiple sections and strategically placed channels. A critical moment came when this clay mold was placed into the kiln. As the temperature rose, the wax inside did not simply soften, it melted completely, flowing out through the drainage channels. The wax was quite literally lost, leaving behind a perfect, hollow negative space within the now hardened clay mold, a cavity that held the exact shape of the original sculpture. The potter would then pour liquid clay, a specially prepared slip, into this empty space. The mold would be fired a second time, solidifying the slip into a new ceramic form. Once cooled, the outer mold was carefully broken away, revealing a perfect, hollow ceramic replica of the initial wax model. This was a destructive process. The original wax model was gone forever, and the mold was shattered. Each casting was unique and irreplaceable. The most stunning example of this technique's power is the Terracotta Army of China. While the thousands of life-sized soldiers are solid in their lower halves, their torsos and arms were created using a sophisticated adaptation of the lost wax principle. Artisans crafted hollow body sections, allowing for faster production and making the immense figures far lighter and more manageable. The survival of this complex, multi-stage method, with its inherent risks and high cost, speaks to a powerful human drive. It was not about creating functional parts for daily use. It was about achieving an artistic vision that transcended practicality. It was a bridge between the worlds of pottery and monumental sculpture, a testament to the fact that when the human spirit desires to create something truly enduring, it will invent a way, no matter how elaborate the path. Yet the monumental scale of the Terracotta Army stands in stark contrast to the quiet, persistent resilience found in everyday communities. While empires rose and fell, indigenous pottery practices have survived not just centuries, but millennia, often in the face of immense pressure from colonization and industrialization. Consider the Pueblo peoples of the American Southwest. For over 2,000 years, they have maintained a pottery tradition that is a direct line to their ancient ancestors. The methods are deceptively simple, yet they carry the weight of generations. A Pueblo potter still begins by gathering clay from sacred deposits, often saying a prayer of thanks to the earth. They use the ancient coil and scrape technique, building a pot layer by layer, and then smoothing the walls with a gored rib or a worn piece of stone. The firing is not done in a permanent kiln, but in an open pit, a carefully controlled bonfire where pots are nestled among dried animal dung and shredded cedar bark. The results are vessels of profound beauty, often decorated with symbolic designs passed down through oral tradition, patterns that represent rain clouds, migration paths, or spiritual beings. For these communities, pottery is not merely a craft. It is a vital part of cultural identity, spiritual belief, and a living oral history. Each step of the process, from the gathering of the clay to the final firing, is imbued with meaning and ceremony. The continuation of these practices, often by women who are the primary tradition bearers, represents a profound act of cultural preservation and quiet resistance. In a world that often values speed and mass production, the persistence of hand-coiled pots fired in an open flame is a powerful statement. It ensures that an entire worldview, a way of understanding humanity's relationship with the earth, is not lost but is continually reborn with each new vessel that emerges from the fire. This intuitive feel for the material was a language that could never be fully translated into words. It was a rhythm learned not from a manual, but from years of living alongside a master. The survival of these ancient techniques across countless generations hinged on one profoundly human institution, the master-apprentice relationship. This was an education of total immersion, a slow and sacred passing of the torch. A young apprentice did not begin by throwing a perfect pot. They started at the edges, performing the most humble tasks, mixing clay by treading on it with bare feet, chopping wood for the kiln, or sweeping the workshop floor. To an outsider, it might have looked like simple labor, but in reality, it was a crucial period of absorption. The apprentice was learning the cadence of the craft, the seasonal rhythms of clay preparation, the master's daily rituals, and the unspoken rules of the studio. They learned by watching the way a master would wedge a lump of clay, sensing its readiness by the sound it made when slapped. They memorized glaze recipes not from a list, but by handing the master specific bowls of powdered minerals in a precise, silent sequence. This knowledge was transmitted orally, a fragile chain of spoken wisdom. The exact temperature for a reduction firing was not a number, but a description of the flame's color, a pale straw yellow visible through a tiny spy hole. The right consistency for a slip was described as thick as winter honey. These were sensory benchmarks, impossible to quantify but perfectly clear to someone who had experienced them firsthand. The ultimate goal was to develop muscle memory and an almost subconscious intuition. A master potter could sense a slight change in the resistance of the clay on the wheel, indicating a hidden air pocket, or smell a shift in the kiln's atmosphere that signaled a critical moment. This tacit knowledge, this deep craft sensibility, is what books and diagrams fail to capture. It is why this ancient pedagogical model has endured, even into our age of digital tutorials. You can watch a video on how to center clay, but you cannot feel the subtle, yielding pressure through the screen. The Master-Apprentice System preserved something more valuable than a set of instructions. It preserved a living connection to the spirit of the craft itself, ensuring that the fingerprints of the past were pressed directly into the hands of the future. These broken pieces of pottery scattered across ancient sites are far more than just fragments. They are frozen moments in time, a direct record of the potter's actions from thousands of years ago. Archaeology acts as our time machine, allowing us to peer directly into the workshop of a long-vanished artisan. The evidence is often subtle but incredibly revealing. At a dig site, the discovery of a kiln's foundation is like finding the engine room of the entire operation. The very shape of the firebox, the arrangement of flues, and the type of bricks used tell a specific story about the temperatures that could be achieved and the atmosphere the potter was trying to create. Even more telling are the wasters, the pots that cracked, warped, or fused together during firing and were discarded by the ancient potter themselves. To a modern expert, these failures are a treasure trove of information. A warped pot indicates a temperature that was too high or too uneven, while a glaze that turned dull and cloudy suggests a problem with the kiln's atmosphere. These ancient mistakes provide a candid snapshot of the technical challenges and limitations the potters faced, but the detective work goes even deeper into the molecular structure of the clay itself. Using techniques like X-ray fluorescence, scientists can analyze a pottery shard and determine its precise chemical fingerprint. They can identify the specific clay source it came from, trace the mineral composition of a glaze, and even reverse engineer the firing temperature by studying how the clay crystals vitrified. This scientific analysis can confirm, for instance, that a particular Roman pot was fired in a reducing atmosphere, or that the cobalt blue on a Ming dynasty vase originated from the same Persian mines described in ancient trade logs. This hard data creates an unbreakable link between the artifact and the technique that created it. Yet perhaps the most powerful connection comes from studying living traditions. Ethnographic researchers work with traditional potters in communities from the American Southwest to rural India, observing their methods firsthand. Watching a potter coil a vessel today using the exact same motions seen in the wear patterns on a 5,000-year-old tool is a profound experience. It is not merely a similarity, it is a direct continuation. By documenting the oral histories, the clay-gathering rituals, and the firing techniques of these modern practitioners, researchers can create a living reference library. They can ask questions that the silent artifacts cannot answer. Why is this type of wood chosen for the firing? How do you know when the clay is perfectly centered by feel alone? The answers provide a crucial interpretive key for understanding the choices made by their ancient counterparts. This combination of hard science and living culture continuously confirms a remarkable truth. The core techniques of wedging clay, centering it on a wheel, and transforming it in a kiln are not modern reconstructions. They are the very same physical actions, the same applied physics that have been performed by human hands for millennia. Each pot made today is not a replica, but a new verse in an ancient, unbroken song. Machines began to replicate the potter's hands. The 18th and 19th centuries introduced the jigger and the jolly, mechanical arms that could press clay into molds with relentless, identical precision. A single factory could now produce thousands of identical cups and plates in the time a master potter might create one. This industrial efficiency threatened to extinguish the very soul of the craft, reducing the unique vessel born of human touch to a mere commodity. Yet from the smoke of these new factories arose a powerful resistance. A movement of thinkers and artists looked upon the flood of mass-produced wares and saw not progress but a profound loss. They argued that a machine-made plate was sterile, devoid of the life and spirit imbued by the potter's hand. The leader of this philosophical rebellion was William Morris, who declared that a home should contain nothing that is not both useful and beautiful. His arts and crafts movement became a rallying cry for the handmade. It was a defense of the slight irregularities, the subtle fingerprints, the gentle asymmetries that proved an object was made by a person, not a mechanism. This was not a rejection of technology, but a reclamation of value. It shifted the very definition of pottery. No longer was its worth measured solely by its function to hold water or grain. Its new value lay in its individuality, in its connection to human creativity. This critical revaluation saved traditional techniques from extinction. Throwing on a wheel or coiling a pot was no longer just a way to make a dish. It was an artistic statement. The craft was reborn not as a fading utility, but as a vital form of personal and cultural expression. This ensured that the ancient knowledge of clay and fire would not be forgotten, but would instead find a new, enduring purpose in a world increasingly dominated by the machine. The hum of the factory floor could not silence the quiet rebellion taking shape in small studios and workshops. This was the birth of the modern studio potter, a new kind of artist who reclaimed pottery from mass production and returned its soul. No longer a factory worker repeating a single task, the studio potter became the sole author of the entire process, from digging the clay to pulling the finished piece from the kiln. This shift was not just about making objects, it was a philosophical stand, a declaration that the hand of the maker was the most valuable tool of all. At the heart of this movement was Bernard Leach, a figure who bridged worlds. After studying art in England, Leach traveled to Japan, where he immersed himself in the country's deep ceramic traditions. He did not see these techniques as mere craft, but as a way of life, infused with the Zen principles of simplicity, humility, and a profound respect for natural materials. When he returned to England and established the Leach pottery in St. Ives in 1920, he brought with him a radical idea, a fusion of Eastern aesthetic philosophy and Western studio practice. Leach, along with his Japanese colleague Shoji Hamada, advocated for pots that were first and foremost useful, but that also carried the unmistakable mark of the human spirit. They championed the beauty of the imperfect, the warmth of a slightly uneven rim, the quiet drama of a wood-ash glaze. Their work was not a slavish imitation of the past, but a conscious, expressive dialogue with it. They deliberately chose to work with traditional methods like wood firing and hand building, not out of nostalgia, but because these processes yielded a unique, living quality that industrial methods could never replicate. A pot thrown on a kick wheel and transformed by the unpredictable breath of a wood kiln was a record of a specific day, a specific fire, and a specific pair of hands. This movement gave ancient techniques a vital new reason to exist. Wood firing was no longer just an efficient way to make storage jars. It was a path to achieving surfaces of unparalleled depth and complexity. Salt glazing, where salt is thrown into the kiln to create a distinctive orange peel texture, became a celebrated artistic choice rather than an industrial shortcut. By placing these historical processes at the center of a modern artistic practice, the studio pottery movement ensured they would be studied, preserved, and passed on to new generations not as relics, but as vibrant, essential languages of creative expression. Ironically, the very forces of globalization and digital saturation have ignited a powerful counter-movement, one that finds profound value in the local and the tactile. The handmade pot, once threatened by industrial efficiency, has found a new and vibrant life in the 21st century. Online marketplaces and social media platforms have become the new village squares, where a potter in a rural studio can connect directly with a collector on the other side of the world. These digital spaces do more than just sell wares, they build communities. Enthusiasts share videos of kick wheels in motion and the mesmerizing process of wood firing, transforming what were once guarded workshop secrets into a globally accessible visual language. This has sparked a renaissance of interest, drawing new generations to apprenticeships and workshops, eager to learn the very skills their great-grandparents might have taken for granted. This revival is fueled by a growing cultural craving for authenticity. In a world saturated with identical, mass-produced objects, a bowl that bears the slight wobble of a human hand, or a vase marked by the unpredictable kiss of flame, carries a unique emotional weight. It is not just a container, it is a story. The sustainability of these ancient methods adds another layer of resonance. The entire philosophy of traditional pottery is inherently eco-conscious. It champions the use of local clays, reducing the carbon footprint of transportation. It relies on hand power or simple, non-electric tools like the kick wheel. Even the wood-fired kiln, when managed with responsibly sourced fuel, represents a closed loop of natural materials returning to the earth through fire and ash. But perhaps the deepest appeal lies in the process itself. The deliberate, meditative rhythm of wedging clay, the focused concentration required to center it on the wheel, the patient waiting during a long firing, these actions offer a tangible antidote to the frantic, disembodied pace of digital life. To work with clay is to be fully present in the physical world, to engage in a slow conversation with a material that cannot be rushed. This is why these techniques are not museum pieces. They are vital, living arts that speak directly to the human needs of our time, proving that some ancient wisdom becomes more relevant, not less, as the world around us accelerates. From the first pinch pot to the sophisticated wood-fired kilns of today, the story of traditional pottery is a story of human ingenuity, cultural memory, and an unbroken connection to the earth. These techniques have survived empires, revolutions, and industrialization because they answer a fundamental human need to create, to express, and to leave a tangible mark. They remind us that some forms of knowledge are too precious to be lost, carrying within them the fingerprints of countless generations. As we hold a piece of handmade pottery, we hold a piece of history itself, a silent testament to the enduring power of craft. Which of these ancient techniques do you find most fascinating, the alchemy of the kiln or the simple intimacy of the coil? Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more journeys into the mysteries of our shared past.